All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the MIT Faculty Forum Alumni Edition. I'm Barbara Moran. I'm a science writer in Boston, and I was a Knight Science Journalism Fellow at MIT in 2002. I will serve as moderator for today's panel. As a reminder, we welcome questions during this chat. For the MIT alumni joining us via Zoom, please use a Q&A feature up in the top left corner of your screen. For people listening on YouTube, you can add questions to the comments field and they'll be forwarded to us. And we also encourage you to tweet questions to us using the hashtag MIT Better World. That's all one word, hashtag MIT Better World. We'll get to as many questions as we can. I also want to let you know the chat feature has been disabled. So don't worry if you see it saying it's disabled up there on your screen. Today, we're going to hear from three very distinguished alumni who will share some of their research on the internet and some of their current projects. We're going to start with an overview from each panelist. You can, each one of you can catch us up on your career since leaving MIT and talk about some of your current work. The three panelists are Brewster Kahle, who is the founder and digital librarian of the Internet Archive, Jaffe, Chief Executive Officer of the World Wide Web Consortium, and Steve Gordon, a professor of IT management at Babson. We're going to start with Brewster. You want to go ahead and give us an overview of yourself? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Brewster Kahle, geek. Been working on universal access to all knowledge. Can we actually make it so that all the published works of humankind can be made available to anybody wanting to have access? Turns out technically, absolutely. Institutionally, it's a little harder. But not only do we then make all these works available, we have them available in computer form. So all sorts of new types of services can happen. But I'm going to talk about actually the web and trying to lock the web open. And I'm going to try to do something that's generally scary to do. I'm going to share my screen and do a very, very brief lightning talk on this subject. Can we lock the web open? Over the last 20 years, people have been pouring themselves into this web in this radical sharing experiment, which is fantastic, the World Wide Web. But we've learned a lot during that time. So Larry Lessig, my hero, has said the code is law, that basically our values are placed inside the technology itself. But it turns out the web is fragile. We know this because the web has been changing. In 100 days is the lifetime of a web page, and we collect 1 billion web pages every week. So we know that it's fragile. It's also not very available. You can get to it from a lot of places, but not the Internet Archive is not available in China or Russia. And a lot of things like the New York Times are not available. So it's not actually kind of what we'd had imagined. Also with Snowden, we found that a lot of it's being monitored. GCHQ watched all the usage of WikiLeaks and handed it to the NSA for whatever it is they wanted to go and do with that. So spying is now built in, but it is fun. We have a World Wide Web that is a lot of fun to go and play with. So out of the big three opportunities of reliable, private, and fun, I'd say we really nailed one of them, which is fun. So can we go and do something that is reliable, private, and fun this time around? I'd say yes, and let's go shoot straight for it. But what do I mean by a decentralized web? A decentralized web is actually not what we have now. It would be more like the internet itself. The internet, where any particular part of the internet can go down, and it still routes around and makes it work. That's not how the web works. You take out a particular piece of hardware, it goes down. It's a little bit more like almost how Amazon works. Data centers all over the world that you can go and move things around between them to get them closer to users and faster. Can we make the whole web work like that so it's reliable if any piece goes down? This is where peer-to-peer technology comes in. We also want it to be private, so that people don't feel like they're being spied on for reading in the library that is the World Wide Web. So can we do that? Yes, that's where encryption, distributed, decentralized name situation works. Let's also give it a time dimension. Let's make it so that the web isn't the perpetual present. Let's make it so that the different versions of the web are built into the system. And if we can make it so that people can actually still make money, that's that would be the thing that fuels it going forward. We have technologies that Tim Berners-Lee didn't have originally. We have encryption, blockchain, we have JavaScript that you can go and use the browsers for doing things. And none of this is new. I mean, people have been working on it, but mostly without large institutional support. IPFS, Maelstrom, there's different mechanisms of building decentralized systems. Bitcoin is the most famous right now, but all of this can be done. So I'd say we have the technologies to build a better web. We really need to, otherwise we'll basically lose out to things like phones that are offering money and a little better environments. So I suggest we should lock the web open. Can we bake the First Amendment into the web itself? Can we make openness irrevocable? Yes, we can. We can make it so that the web is permanent, and it would be something like a decentralized web. And I just put this forward as a research agenda, but people are actually going off now and building it and having conferences around this idea. That's my mini rant, and I hope it helps move the conversation forward. I'll stop sharing.
Great, super. Thank you so much, Brewster. That was fascinating. Jeff, you're up next.
Thanks. So as Barbara mentioned, I'm the CEO of the World Wide Web Consortium, and I wanted to spend a few minutes just introducing what we do at the World Wide Web Consortium and where we came from. So soon after Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, he wanted to make sure that it became a place of innovation where you could continually make it better and better. But he was worried that some well-funded innovator might grab proprietary control of the web. So he created a consortium called the W3C so that everyone who's interested in enhancing the web technology base can work together collaboratively. So that's what we are. We're a community that was founded by Tim. Tim continues as the director of W3C. We set technical standards for the web. HTML is, of course, the most famous one. No standard becomes a web standard without Tim's personal approval. We're a member-based organization. Today we have close to 500 member organizations. A member organization could be a company, a startup, a university, .org, research organization. Any of those could be members of W3C. About 7 years ago, we decided that we were pretty good at defining standards, but we were less good at innovation and incubation. We started up a mechanism within W3C called community groups, where any 5 innovators who would like to collaborate on a project can do so under the banner of the W3C community group. So even though we're a member organization for the standards that we generate, for the innovation piece, pretty much anyone could participate free of charge. And today we have over 8,000 people working in close to 300 community groups. So many of the ideas that people have, like Brewster's ideas and decentralized web, those could become new community groups in which people work together in the pre-standardization phase. In terms of what we've been doing recently, most of our work recently has been transforming the web from being a large database of static information to dynamic information, a web of applications where people build web applications which work essentially as distributed applications across multiple systems, making sure that we address societal problems such as web accessibility for people that have challenges or security, privacy issues. And the other thing that's happened, of course, in the last few years is not only is the web a fun place for people to just have fun, but it's also a place where industry has latched onto it and have made this their delivery vehicle. So entertainment is moving to the web. Publishing is moving to the web. Telecommunications is moving to the web. Even the connected car is starting to use web technologies. And every time that a new set of use cases come in from a new industry, that drives core technology changes in the web. And that's become an important part of our work over the last several years. When I was asked to join this panel on fixing the web, it was like, coals to Newcastle, because when we look at what do we need to work on, basically, I had just given a presentation a few months earlier, and I had categorized things into 6 areas. It's how the web is changing business and society, societal needs more generally. What are opportunities that we have to make it a more captivating experience in terms of images and graphics and things like that? Industry needs, extending the reach of the web, and finally, the areas that need fixing. We'll leave most of that to the panel discussion, but just to say a couple of words about the areas that need fixing. When we do the taxonomy that I just gave, the 2 areas that we focus on the most underneath fixing is, first of all, performance, and second of all, security. So performance doesn't really sound like it's broken, except for the fact that whenever any of us access a web page, it takes forever, right? So it's broken, even though we don't call it broken. And we have projects that are, first of all, looking at instrumenting the web. Mostly we don't know what's going on. We don't know where the performance problems are. And so if we can instrument the web better, then we will learn better. And there are also, we also have a project called WebAssembly, which is trying to make more of the web kind of implementable in an assembly language fashion that you know what's going to happen in advance. You don't have to recalculate everything every single time. In the area of security, some of our favorite projects, Web Crypto is a recently completed standard. It turns out that almost every hardware device that you have has great crypto in it, and almost any person building a web application has absolutely no idea how to use that crypto. So the Web Crypto project essentially is to establish APIs so that if you're building a JavaScript application, it's totally trivial to use the crypto in your device so you can start encrypting things. We have a project called Web Authentication, in which we're trying to get the web to move from insecure passwords to multi-factor solutions. So a factor could be a password, but another factor could be something that you actually physically have, like your phone. And then we also write guidelines. We have a group called Web Application Security, which basically writes a ton of guidelines of how do you build a secure web application, because there's lots of people building stuff for the web, but building it securely is a very sophisticated and difficult thing to do, and people simply need guidance. So we not only develop standards, but we also develop guidance on how to use those standards. With that, I think my 5 minutes are probably up, so I will pass it on to the next one, and I'll be back for the panel discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. Steve, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I am a little bit different from the others in this panel, although I have degrees in MIT from course 1, 6, and 18. For the last 30 years, I have been a faculty member at a business school, Babson College. And so I have a business perspective as opposed to a technical perspective. When Erin asked me to be part of a panel looking at fixing the web, I said, does the web need fixing? The web has been a marvelous instrument for business. We've certainly seen that it has improved business processes. Personal communications and connections have been maintained and enhanced through social media. We've got large-scale data collection to support deep learning, artificial intelligence, a lot of good things. And we do recognize, of course, that there are technical issues. Speed of page loading is one, as Jeff has indicated. Security is another. And there are even management issues, which I haven't studied, such as governance issues, where the W3C comes into play, right? But my research is largely related to the web. My only research related to the web really has been focusing on how the web makes the world a better place, more fixing the world with the web than fixing the web itself. And I'll talk only briefly about that because I think it's a little bit off topic for this panel. But my two most recent efforts in this regard are one, a book that's been published by IGI Publishing that's called Online Communities as Agents of Change in Social Media. Certainly online communities are facilitated by the web, They're not possible without it. Of course, you do have communities of interest that can exist without the web, but it's very difficult to actually make those work very well. And I've also looked at the power, the political power of social media, and this is a follow-up of work that was published in Foreign Affairs magazine in 2011 by Clay Shirky, which addressed how the web actually exerts political power and what should the United States in this particular case do about it. How should we use it to exert political power? And this was really before the Arab Spring, so really needed some updating. And I've always been fascinated by this because the issue of centralization and decentralization, which our other panelists talked about, is key to the power of the web. If one thinks about media in ancient times, media was simply graffiti on a wall, or orators standing up, and thoughts, ideas moved very slowly. And I think the first big change to that was the printing press. And as a manual printing press, you could create pamphlets and things like that. There was media that was obviously not web-based, but it did move discussion along more quickly and allowed ideas to be exchanged more quickly. But power became centralized as the press became more electronic. So you then had newspapers that could be developed, and there was a lot of power concentrated in newspapers. And that power became even more centralized as radio and television became available. The first big change to that was the web, which began to decentralize, gave individual people some power, the ability to publish and to connect with others. And so social media now do exert fairly significant social power, political power, as you can see by what the President of the United States how the President of the United States has wielded it. And I don't want to overstate my time, but I've identified 5 areas really where 5 ways in which social media have changed the balance of power, or can exert political power. One is raising community awareness, and the power of a group is much more than the power of its individual members, and the web makes that available. They can communicate with one another, they can exert that power, they can create networks, as Castell said, of outrage and hope. You see examples in Black Lives Matter movement and even the Arab Spring, where that became important. The web also is important in framing issues. So when you have discussions from people who look at the same issue from different perspectives, you can create essentially a frame of reference. So an example is one which personalizes the idea, such as we are the 99%, which actually personalized the idea of income inequality, right? Everyone can sign up for that and believe that they're part of that. A marriage equality as a means for discussing what had previously been thought of as same-sex or gay marriage, same-sex marriage or gay marriage, put a different spin on it, and it's quite likely that that spin or that frame of reference had an implication for how it was received and how it was viewed by the Supreme Court. 3 other areas: engaging with mass media. Example is the Occupy movement, which actually had no presence in mass media for about a week after it started, until it could be brought to the attention of mass media. And then stimulating and organizing protests, Black Lives Matter, Occupy movement, and obtaining resources. So there are other examples where Kickstarter is an example, of course, and then we've got from a social perspective, Coney 2012 is an example. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, that was a great introduction, everybody. Thank you. We have a lot to talk about. The questions are already pouring in. I wanted to start, before I go to the questions in the audience, I wanted to ask one, if one of you might want to weigh on. Hearing all of you talk, I was struck by the fact that none of you mentioned government at all, federal government, and that talking about all the power and possibility and security issues and all this stuff going on at the web. And there's been a lot of talk recently about new FCC rules, and that didn't come up with any of you. Do you guys all think the government stuff is irrelevant and that the web is, you know, a power of its own? Or how would you, when you weigh in on that? Or are you following the FCC stuff and other government things with, you know, close interest? How do you guys think about all that? Brewster, you want to say something?
Yeah, we're in a dark time. The net neutrality discussion seems like people are thinking that it's already been thrown under a bus, that we basically are building fast lanes, slow lanes, or however you want to look at it. Just moving the control into very large corporations that tend to have very close ties with their governments. Make it so that a lot of the openness that we built as part of the ARPANET and then the internet and the World Wide Web and those open standards are definitely under threat. And so we have to push back on that. But man, we're seeing all sorts of problems. We're having the Great Firewall of China. Wikipedia is blocked in Turkey. Russia blocks archive.org. We have the role of government is looming large, the surveillance network. If we really, you know, end our careers going and saying, gosh, wasn't that great? We went and built the largest surveillance network ever. You know, it's the Stasi on steroids. I mean, what a horrible thing to have done with our careers. But that is largely going in place. And unless we do active measures, and we are the establishment, let's go and do something about this. Let's go and make the technology better. Let's push on the governments to the extent we can. But we've made the most progress by just doing things, making things work, and showing that new things can happen. If there had been a bunch of lawyers going and saying whether we should have Alta Vista crawl the World Wide Web or what became Google, somebody would have said, no, I think we should have waited. We wouldn't have the world that we currently have. It was based on people wanting to have open communications, educational materials for all. That's how we've built this damn thing. Let's keep it going.
All right. So Brewster says, lawyers, out of here, technologists.
No, that's helpful, but it's not going to be waiting around for another. Let's just send in our submission to the FCC and everything's going to get better. We need to push on it on all fronts.
One thing that I've learned in my research, even in countries where there is a great deal of government restraint on the internet and on communication in general, is that people have found ways to work around that. A lot of that has to do with encryption, and there are obviously ways to communicate even when various things are blocked, but they are of course afraid of surveillance, and a lot of the communication that does goes on in encrypted form, and is although I have to say it's somewhat limited.
Yeah, Jeff, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think first of all, Brewster is completely correct that there are major issues with governments. And he's also correct that the best way to deal with that is to, at some level, ignore the governments and just do the work. And that's really what our motto is. So we're a technical standards organization. We're a global organization. I mean, we are basically in every single country in the world. And it's interesting, technical standards used to be done by governments.
Right.
And in the case of the internet with IETF, in the case of the web with W3C, we actually, we allow governments to participate. They're a stakeholder. They can join W3C just like anyone else. But we are trying to be extremely clear that they're just a stakeholder. And in getting the technical standards for the web or the internet defined, they don't have any special role. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't important policy issues that need to be addressed. And one of the things that Tim Berners-Lee did in the last several years is to make sure that there's a clear focus both on the technology and on policy, is he created a foundation called the Web Foundation, which speaks out all the time on net neutrality, web rights, and extremely effective in doing that. And in W3C, the best way we deal with the government is by ignoring them and just getting our work done.
All right, that's loud and clear. Jeff, while we're here, this first question from audience member, Anonymous, wanted to hear about the recent DRM endorsement from W3C, and you wanted to take that question. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wanted to, and of course I have no choice but to take that question. So first of all, I want to make it extremely clear that W3C has not endorsed DRM. So just words matter, and we have in no way endorsed DRM. So what is the relationship between W3C and DRM? So as everybody knows, one of the great recent results of the web is that hundreds of millions of people are watching video on the web, which is actually a great result for the internet and the web. But what happened is that happened in a pre-standardization fashion. And today it's done through unarchitected interfaces. And those unarchitected interfaces compromise security, they compromise privacy, they make it expensive to get some of that loaded onto the web, and they make it difficult for people with accessibility challenges. So what we've done is we've developed a new proposed standard called EME, Encrypted Media Extensions, that instead of displaying these movies to hundreds of millions of people in an insecure and privacy violating fashion, we've built it in a way that makes it secure for people to watch movies. Now, most of those movies are protected by DRM. And so there are many people who think that we're endorsing DRM for that reason, but we've actually made very clear, and Tim Berners-Lee stated in a blog post, that there are problems with DRM, and those are well recognized. And as part of my motto of ignoring government, we think that people who influence governments really should work hard on some of the parts of the laws which are inconvenient or probably incorrect.
Can I jump in here?
Absolutely.
There's real problems to having DRM embedded in the web and supported as part of the infrastructure. As a librarian, there's going and archiving things that can, by under fair use or any other rules, could be archived and made available to future generations, are encrypted in ways that make it very, very difficult to do our job. But it's even worse than that. And here's where the W3C can be helpful, is it is illegal to try to break these protections under US law, and unless it's actually waived. So not only is it difficult to do our job, it's scary to be a librarian. And this doesn't make any sense at all. So how do we get around this? I would say, let's run with your idea, Jeff, of going and avoiding the government, and let's write them out of the standards. And this is mostly, I'm trying to channel Cory Doctorow and the Electronic Frontier Foundation on this, and I may not be getting it completely correct. But if you were to use some of these standards, you could go and say, gosh, okay, if you're doing that, then we agree to not use the federal government of the United States to be our police, to go and hunt down and arrest people that break the DRM. So you're okay to basically use the rule of law of basically librarians and fair use. This could be done within the standard structure, just as Richard Stallman came up with a brilliant idea that you could basically opt in to lowering, making sharing happen, even though the government says everything's copyrighted forever. You can have some rights reserved, to use Larry Lessig's. I think we could have some rights reserved by using your standards. There's mechanisms for us to route around some of the government bad ideas.
So Cory has some good ideas there, and Brewster has some good ideas there. And in the last 4 years, we've actually tried to push that through our membership about 4 times. And to date, Corey has failed and I have failed, and we've all failed to push that through the membership. So, we're at a point today that we don't think the fight should stop. We think that the overreaches of some of the copyright laws should be addressed in one way or another. But we don't want, while we're all working on that and while we're searching for consensus on that, we don't want hundreds of millions of people to access movies in insecure and in a way which violates their privacy. And so,
Jeff,
we have to make an engineering trade-off there.
Jeff, I want to get to some other questions, but can you briefly tell me where the resistance is coming from? But why you're having trouble pushing that through your membership?
Well, I mean, a membership would typically be a company, and a member would be a company, and we're telling the company, we want you to sign on a piece of paper that if someone breaks your encryption, that you will not use the rights that you have under the law. You'll sign up to the notion that you will forego those rights, and in chasing someone who's broken your encryption. And then we make it more palatable for them. We say, if they're just a security researcher, don't prosecute those guys. I mean, if someone is trying to break your business model, that's one thing, but they're just doing security research. So, we have a lot of persuasive authority, but we don't have any legal authority. And it's just hard to convince companies to give up that right. So that's, we've proposed it to them several times. Corey's proposed it to them. At some point in the time in the future, they may agree. I mean, we have other areas where we have gotten companies to give up rights. So one of the famous things about W3C is our patent policy. If someone contributes to a W3C specification,
Oh, we lost you, Jeff.
Yes.
Are you back
up
on?
their policy. No one can exercise their policy rights. And so after many years, we got companies to give that up. It may happen for these rights, but it's a hard battle.
Okay, great, thank you. It's interesting, a lot of these topics, they touch on all these tensions within the web, which in a way are the same tensions in the country, right? Between freedom, security, availability, making money, it's just all these sort of these tensions at work there that are the same in our country. It's just sort of an interesting thing. A couple questions have come in about cookies on the web. I wonder if anybody wants to address those. One question is, a big part of the slowness on the web due to inefficiency in advertising tech, cookie matching, viewability measurement. Are there ways you can simplify the technology in a way that maintain user privacy while fairly compensating content publishers? That's along the lines of what we're just talking about. Another one person asking, what do you think of cookie taxes that states are putting out on online merchants? Anybody want to take that one? Nobody wants to take it. Somebody's want to take it, Jeff.
I could perhaps, talk a little bit about it more generally, and the point about, advertisements being a problem for all sorts of reasons, right? I mean, it creates performance problems. It's distracting. It's done in 15 different ways. It's a mess. So, so that's on my to-do list. That one yet. As I said during my brief introductory remarks, a lot of our focus recently has been shifting from the broad web that we all use to specific industries. How do industries utilize the web? Sometimes when we look at how the entertainment industry uses the web, we get into these knotty problems that we talked about earlier in terms of encryption. Other industries like digital publishing are a little bit less complicated. On my to-do list is to figure out how to engage the digital advertising industry. Because I think as a whole, the whole notion of even the fidelity of, advertisers think that they're getting something when they sign up for something. Their advertisement doesn't always show up on the screen at the frequency that they think they contracted for and in the form that they think they contracted for. So I think a huge issue is to create any standards for advertising. That's not currently in scope for W3C, but I'm looking into how can we make that in the scope of W3C? How do we build a community to look at that problem?
I think we've got a more fundamental problem. It's very difficult to make money by publishing on the web. About the only real mechanism we have is advertising. And we know how that story ends. It ends up with great centralization of people that control ad networks. It's played out in radio and television and magazines, and it's playing out in the web. It's not great. If we had better mechanisms to go and paying people and make it easy, people will do it. But right now, you pretty much have to sign on to an Amazon.com or a PayPal or some platform, an iTunes, to go and sell your stuff over the web. This doesn't make any sense. We now actually have money having an API, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or the like. We have mechanisms to make it so you can drop coins in boxes and make it go. We have serious problems on the part of governments that are trying to shoot down anything related to payments that isn't under their direct control. But we have the technologies to be able to put that into the web and weave it into the web. If we made it easier for people to make money, I don't think we'll see as many people running to building apps where they've gone and made the whole infrastructure for going and getting paid. Okay, Apple gets a 40% cut, but for people, a lot of people, they say that's better than nothing. And if we can go and make it so there's more peer-to-peer, so more private, a relationship between buyer and seller, I think that could be a great step forward. It would empower business to, and I would say it would give the web a new lease on life beyond being kind of spam-ridden, adware, pop-ups, sort of disaster that it's sort of evolving into for lack of options at the payment levels.
I agree with Brewster entirely on this. I think the advertising does serve one function, and obviously it is a means for generating the income you need to put something out on the web. But I do think that the blockchain technology is something that you will see increasingly used to enable the peer-to-peer type of exchanges that we would like to have in a more decentralized economy. I have nothing against the app economy versus the web economy. I think they're both, they will coexist, and I think that that's fine.
Right. Okay, thank you. That was really interesting. One of the other questions that came in, and this has been in the news a lot, is the fake news question. And that is certainly, I would say, counts as a problem of the internet that needs to be fixed. And all these various news organizations are struggling to fix it in various ways. One attendee asked, does the panel have any faith in fake news issues being settled with better AI or so in?
Oh, let me rant a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm playing ranter in chief on this panel here. Okay, Twitter. The idea of having 140 characters be a way that
on the web. What do you guys think about that?
Campaign was associated is just horrible, and I'd say Twitter is a large part to blame. The medium is the message. I'm a McLuhanist in that way. If you only have 140 characters, you just shout. It's just headlines. It doesn't have, and the now even as president, he doesn't link to other things. It's just he just says stuff. So who picked 140 characters, and why didn't they change that? And so we have platform problems. We have the Facebook problems. These technologies weren't built for running campaigns, but boy, have they been abused. And these platform companies haven't adapted. One potential win that we could do, and it would be very much within the web world, is to provide context to the page you're looking at. So wouldn't it be great if there were a sidebar that gave you information that worked at the speed of Wikipedia and the like, that give you the ideas of, what am I looking at? Is this stale? Is this, what is it? Mozilla has a idea of having the forward button, having a sidebar of context about what you're looking at. So you may get it through some social media feed, whatever it might be from news. And then what if you could get other ideas about it right at that time? This is not the semantic web. This is going and doing a rendezvous function in part of your browser to go and give you context about what it is you're looking at. Some people aren't going to care. They're just going to want to live in their bubble. But an awful lot of people want to know, and we don't have the technologies for them. The platform companies are to blame, and I think that we as the industry, as the browser manufacturers, we can make better tools and doesn't have to invoke AI to solve the world.
Of course, this isn't just a web problem. It's a media problem in general. But yes, I think we can. I think there's an opportunity out there for somebody to jump, for some company to jump in and do what Brewster has suggested. And I expect it'll happen. I mean, if there's a demand for it, somebody will jump in and supply it. I hope.
Definitely. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to ask, there's an interesting question still out there that it's kind of provocative about somebody asking, I find it fascinating how oblivious Americans are about the great bulk of the World Wide Web usage done in China. Aren't the greatest advances in web technology going to come from there in the next decades?
So
what do you think?
I think that China has a huge innovative community, and a lot of advances will come from there, and we're not oblivious. We're not ignoring it at all. So I've been to China about 25 times. We have our annual meeting around the world every year. In 2017, we had it in Beijing. When W3C, so just to say a little bit more about W3C's organization. So W3C is headquartered at MIT, something which all MIT alumni should love, part of CSAIL. And it's hosted, when it was originally created, it was hosted in 3 locations. In the logic of 1994, it had to be in Europe, it had to be in the US, and to cover Asia, it had to be in Japan. So here we are many years later, and Japan is important, but Japan doesn't fully cover Asia. So in 2013, we added a 4th host in China, and a lot of the most innovative Chinese companies, including Alibaba, China Mobile, Tencent, Baidu, they're all members of W3C, as well as some smaller companies, some small browser companies that exist in China. And it's a global community, and China is very much part of it. And we get innovations from China. We have a top-level advisory board, and one of the 9 people on our advisory board is from Alibaba. So we're very global and very aware of China.
Great, thanks. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left. I'm going to give you each 1 minute to tell me, since it's this title of this is Fixing the Web, what do you think is the biggest thing that needs to be fixed on the web right now, if you can sum it up in a sentence? Sorry, I should have warned you about that ahead of time. I'll go to Brewster because I don't know, just because I'm going to pick on Brewster to make him.
I'll take that. There are pieces that weren't put into the web early on. The web was a very simple system, and it made it so it was very easy to have it catch on, but it's getting long in the tooth. We need to fix some of the basics, the security, the decentralized. We need a peer-to-peer back-end infrastructure. We need mechanisms for people to get paid on this. We need the WebAssembly structures such that websites become more like apps and really responsive but still safe to use. If we make a web that makes it for people feel it's dangerous to click on a link because of what we will have lost, and it will be a tremendous shame. We've spent our careers building this, and we've got to throw ourselves full on at the technology, at the policy, at companies that are doing the wrong things because they're short-sighted. We have to go and throw ourselves at it.
Thank you, Brewster. All right, Steve, 1 sentence or 30 seconds about what's the biggest thing to fix about the web?
I think right now there are a couple of big things, and of course security is one of them. But I also think the ability to deal with the Internet of Things as that evolves is something that we haven't thought about very well, and it's beginning to take off, and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you very much. Jeff?
Number 1 is access, which we haven't spoken about very much. There are billions of people that don't have access to the web. A lot of that has to do with money and has to do with finances, which are outside of the control of W3C. But we focus on the part where we can control, which is dealing with people that are challenged accessibility from the point of view of hearing or sight or anything like that. And a full 15% of society has accessibility challenges, and we focus on fixing that. Underneath that, problem number 2 is security. Having a web with all of the valuable data of society available and utilized and insecure is worthless. We really have to fix the security problem.
Great. Okay. So web access is a human right. Advertising's got to get fixed. Keep it secure and keep it fun. Good. Sound like a good, good summary. Thank you. Okay, that was wonderful. Thank you all very much for your contributions and for coming to this. On the behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, thank you for tuning into this Faculty Forum Online Alumni Edition. Thanks again to our alumni panelists from Babson, the Internet Archive, and the World Wide Web Consortium. We'll forward any additional questions to the panel. You can tweet about today's chat using hashtag MIT Better World and send follow-up questions or feedback to alumnilearn@mit.edu. Also, big thanks to our technical crew at MIT who made this seamless as always, Elias Bokion and Zach Whitman. And thank you again for watching, everybody.